So let's be clear, as much as the Americans don't have much of a consolidated Asia strategy outside of security right now, the issue du jour for the G20 will be Putin. And one way or the other, that's going to take up all the oxygen in the room. It's going to be fascinating, but deeply, deeply destructive. And one other thing I would say, and I normally don't think about this, but the fact is that where this war is going to go, and even whether or not a tactical nuclear weapon is used, has a lot to do with Putin's own personality, feeling of being cornered or being humiliated. So the way this G20 plays out might be the most important summit of our lifetimes, right? And we need to think of it in those terms. I'm fascinated by it, but I'm also a little terrified by it. Putin is not in a good place right now, and there aren't many people who are thinking about it from his perspective.
My hope is that Putin decides not to go. I think that is also the Indonesian hope, though they'll never say that, they're the hosts. I think that is also the Chinese hope, but they will never say that, because we've seen this series of actions now by China seeking to leverage the Russians into, as it were, a peace trajectory over Ukraine, as we've seen most recently over tactical nukes. But I think the key message, or the key significance of the G20 in Bali, I hate to say this, and it's not just because we're at the Asia Society, is actually not to do with Russia. This is where I partly am disagreeing with Ian. I think it will primarily be to do with whether or not China and the United States find a mechanism to start stabilising the relationship, as opposed to the continued structural spiral down of this relationship, which has been in free fall for the last 3 years. In aggregate geopolitics, and we're here to talk about the risks posed by but all three countries in this strategic triangle, it is the China-US trajectory which frightens the hell out of me longer term. The Russian one frightens me less if the nuke question is off the table, but you've got horizontal escalation dangers in terms of a fight with NATO. But the thing I'm focused on is whether they're going to look at a formula to authorise their officials to put some stabilising guardrails around the relationship. Don't know whether they will, but I think the mood in both capitals, as I said earlier in our discussion today, is to take the temperature down a notch or two for the short to medium term, because neither of them want to end up in an accidental war in the short to medium term, and there's so much other stuff which is problematic.
Yeah, Kevin's point, certainly what comes out of the US-China relationship is the most important issue, broader, strategically, long-term. My fear is that what happens around Russia and Putin is actually much more of a dangerous tail risk in the near term, and increasingly does reflect that. So whether or not you agree with my or Kevin's perspective there, in part depends on your filter. I definitely agree with Kevin that it's better for everyone if Putin doesn't go. But the problem is that Putin doesn't have the ability to actually turn the war in his favor on the ground. He doesn't have that capacity. We know that. So what else is he going to do? At least with US-China, there are lots of reasons to slow the deterioration or stabilize. Maybe not to build lots of trust, but at least to get off of what looks like a sudden train wreck. Putin's perspective on the war right now doesn't have those incentives, which is why when I think about the G20, that's what I'm focusing on.